Cindy, you're all muted on the Zoom.
Thanks, Al.
So we're in roll call for number 3, Supervisor Bauer.
Here.
Supervisor Dries called and he is excused. Supervisor Burt.
Here.
Supervisor Edgar.
Here.
I can verify that notice was given properly for tonight's meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda before us?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None being heard. Moving on to number 6, public comment. If anybody would like to state your name, address, comments, you'll be limited to 3 minutes, but if anybody would like to share anything, feel free. Is there anyone who wants to make any public comment? Okay, none being, is there anybody on Zoom who wants public comment?
Nope, I do not see anyone with chat or raise hands.
No? All right. Thank you, everyone. Moving forward to item number 7 is a presentation from Strand Engineering, who we have shared on this Zoom call. And the packets that those of you in person have are copies of the slides that you're about to see. I'm sorry, should we rotate that a little bit more? Is that all right? You guys can come up this way too.
Or we can.
Get comfy. Well, yeah, not too close. So, welcome Strand. This is a presentation for a work product that Strand has completed, well done, within the time frame asked to have it completed, for 4 different scopes of work, 4 different tasks that we asked them to evaluate for the town with respect to water sources. And Nate Iwanowski is with us, and he will walk us through these via slides and answer any questions that the board has, and we will get an update on what sort of information they came back to us with. There's a slide. There's also a 3-section packet right now that's been completed. That's over 100 pages of content that's going to serve the board well in its decision making. And that information will be shared with the city of, I believe has probably this afternoon been shared with the city of Peshtigo digitally as well, so that you can have your engineering people do some peer review of it. So Nate, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and start the presentation, feel free.
Sure. Yeah, let me start by just sharing presentation here. Nope. Let's share this one. Does that give you the main slide show here?
No, we do not see it. I can, let's see.
I think I got it. Here we go.
Okay, oh, yes, there we go.
One second. Sharing the wrong screen. There we go. Alrighty, thank you for having us this evening. My name is, like Cindy said, Nate Iwanowski. I'm the lead engineer / presenter for this presentation. I also have on the call with me Steve Kleesner, and he is the current project manager for this. He's been helping me put together the report and the slideshow. I also have Jason Ingram, who's been helping me as well. He's another project engineer. He's also on the phone call as well if there are any questions at the end that neither me or Steve can't answer. So again, welcome. Thanks for having us. And again, this presentation is on the water supply alternatives analysis that we've been completing to identify the town's potential solution. So our main goal was to find a permanent and safer drinking water option out of the 4 that the town had preliminarily identified and asked us if there were any other outstanding ones out there to bring those up, and we didn't find any, unfortunately. But there are 4, viable alternatives that we came up with and looked into. And then it also kind of stemmed here a little bit of background where there was some extensive sampling completed for PFAS in the town limits. The first study on the map of the left here was completed by Arcadis, sampling on behalf of the responsible party, which is Tyco and JCI. So the map on the left shows the samples within the responsible party's identified sampling area, where the different color-coded squares indicate the level of PFAS for each of those residential wells. The image on the right then is outlining a expanded sampling area that the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources identified, which is or was a much wider area that the responsible party had preliminarily identified. And as you can see with the circles this time, the colored circles, red, yellow, and gray, that there were other sample sites that were having detection of PFAS and PFAS compounds. And so those are the 2 primary sampling areas that we were looking at and obtained sampling data for. And the table on the bottom of the slide then shows the different 2 sample areas, and then the number of detection of wells, and then the number of detection of wells that were above the current Wisconsin guideline of 20 parts per trillion of combined PFAS. So definitely not a small problem by any means. Those number of detects are in the hundreds, and so that definitely gives support to this ongoing issue. So as I introduced, there were several different testing areas, and so that brought the need for different areas or delineation of project areas, where the first, I guess we divided into 3 different areas, where area 1 had 2 different subcomponents, where area 1A was the original Tyco JCI initial sampling area, and we'll take a look at these areas in the next slide, but and look at the boundaries. But area 1A was the initial sampling area. There was then a class action settlement area, or area 1B, and for the purposes of this report, we're adding on to the areas where this excludes the area 1A. Area 2 is the area outside of 1A and 1B, but is outlined by the WDNR expanded sampling area. And finally, area 3 is the ultimate town build out, where we need to consider all parts of the town in case the plume expands to all areas of the town. And again, another table below gives a summary of the estimated number of parcels that are currently occupied throughout each of the areas. Multiple sampling areas lead to phased investigation. So like I said, because of the different sampling areas leads to different phases and different, I guess, delineated scopes of area, where 1A again is the Tyco original sampling area. 1B then is the area outside of 1A, but within the settlement area. Area 2 then is within the WDNR sample area. And then finally, and again, this map is cuts off all the other town areas, but just to zoom in on the other areas, where area 3 then is the town limits minus the city limits, and then minus the phases 2 and 1A and 1B. So a little enough of the kind of the phase areas and the delineation of those. We're going to move into the alternatives description, where each of the 4 town identified alternatives provide functional solutions to the town. Where alternative 1 is a town municipal groundwater treatment facility system. And we'll go a little bit in depth here in the preceding slides, but just to give a summary of the 4 alternatives now. Alternative 2 is a municipal surface water treatment facility alternative. Alternative 3 and 4 are similar, but very different, as we'll talk about. But alternative 3 comes from a city of Peshtigo source, where the town would be a retail customer, or I guess the town residents would each be retail customers of the city. And alternative 4 is again sourced from the same city of Peshtigo. However, the town would be considered one wholesale customer to the city. And so within each of those four alternatives, they each include a distribution system, obviously, where the supply has to go somewhere. And so to make it easy, we assume that the distribution system is more or less the same, where it all consists of water main, water services, meters, all sorts of infrastructure components to get the supply to the actual residents. And we've also included a elevated storage tank to mainly provide storage and fire protection to the town. So going into each alternative a little bit more in depth here, alternative one, again, was a municipal groundwater system, where we looked at the available water throughout the whole town limits, where based on many publications and other known water systems in the area, there's two different aquifers or areas within the groundwater system that the town could potentially pull from where you have a sand and gravel, or shallow, as we like to call it, aquifer, and a deep bedrock aquifer. So just to easily distinguish between them, we have a shallow and a deep aquifer, where the picture on the left here outlines I guess the basin of the area, where the town is just a small circle shown in the circle here, where the image on the left shows the sand and gravel aquifer, where you can see the key here, where the more blue the area is, the more available the groundwater is based on different flow rates. And so you can see the areas of the northwest of the town, way far northwest, have plenty of sand and gravel or shallow aquifer water available, whereas near the town, not so much. I mean, we're on the order of 0 to 10 gallons a minute. And so if you're talking about residential wells, that's perfectly fine. However, when you're talking about a municipal, larger capacity well system, that would not be a viable solution. That, and of course, obviously the PFAS contamination being within the sand and gravel or the aquifer right below your feet, that again led to us determining that would not be a viable solution. However, on the right side of this slide, you can see this bedrock aquifer chart, where in the same northwest area, there isn't much capacity, deep below the ground. However, when you get closer to the Green Bay there, you can see the deeper blue, especially along the Green Bay shoreline, where again, the area where the town is, which is a red circle here, indicates that there's very, very good capacity, more than 500 gallons a minute in that area, which again, for a town municipal system is acceptable. And so therefore, based on just from a capacity point of view, a deep bedrock aquifer supplied groundwater system was deemed to be a viable solution. Diving into a little bit more on that. Thank you. To meet some of the guidelines out there based on some of the regulatory agencies, it's a good idea to have redundant sources, or in this case, redundant facilities. And so the alternative includes 2 deep aquifer well facilities with treatment, where it was determined that treatment would be required based on neighboring communities where the city of Peshtigo treats for radium. So this was assumed to be another requirement for the town. However, it's not almost a guaranteed. I mean, you never really know the ultimate water quality until you do a test well and sample the exact well that you're getting from. But for this analysis, we assumed radium would need to be treated, and based on the treatment technology available to remove the radium, your iron and manganese would be a benefit to be removed as well through that treatment. We cited the wells outside of the PFAS flume. Obviously, there is a companion layer, but at some point the PFAS might get deeper and might be contaminating the lower aquifer. However, if we locate it outside of the plume, that gives a better chance of it not being contaminated in the future, and if it's not addressed before then as well. With everything else, we can, based on these design, we can always add additional PFAS treatment if needed in the future as well. So based on these 2 well facilities, water would then get pumped from those facilities to whichever phased area would be deemed to have the distribution system added to. Because there's treatment involved, there is a waste discharge from the treatment. And so because based on previous documentation that the city of Marinette would not be a viable solution to water supply, it was kind of assumed that they wouldn't want to be involved with the wastewater at all either. And so I think for this purpose, we assumed that the city of Peshtigo, again, didn't confirm this, but assumed that they would be the entity available to take the waste discharge from these two drinking water wells. This alternative would include the town needing to establish a water utility. They would own and operate the wells, facilities, and the distribution system. And then the town would be responsible for all the operations, maintenance, and costs that would go around with the system as well. So a couple of images on the right give an example of some of their treatment equipment where you just have these big vessels with media inside of them that filter out any of the contaminants. And they're housing a well facility here, a simple City of Peshtigo treatment facility picture here, courtesy of them in Google Street View. So to summarize, alternative number one is a viable solution for the groundwater municipal water system. Alternative number two, again, is a municipal surface water system where it was sourced from the Green Bay of Lake Michigan. A couple images here show just the different characteristics of Green Bay, where the color here indicates the depth of the water, both the Green Bay, and you can see the Lake Michigan there on the bottom right, where Green Bay is relatively shallow, which is fine. It's deep enough. There's other sources, water supply systems on the Green Bay, but it does pose other interesting characteristics. One big thing, there's a lot of contaminants that do flow into the Green Bay from, the Fox River Valley down in Green Bay. However, the town is more close to the lake inlet. So there's that. There's also different wind characteristics and the like. And so we looked into that, and, based on the comparable systems nearby of the city of Marinette, it was deemed that, based on simple or similar characteristics, that municipal surface water treatment system is another viable solution. A little bit more on the alternative details. There would only be one surface water treatment plant. However, there would be two treatment trains to still give the, the recommended redundancy. These treatment trains would have clarification and filtration treatment processes that would help, remove any of the contaminants and still meet all of the, regulatory requirements for that as well. We preliminarily located it at the boat launch just based on available space. However, it's just needed to find a place for us to put some costs to the alternative. This alternative will also need an intake that we assumed would go about 2,000 feet into Green Bay. Again, similar to alternative one, the water treatment plant would pump finished water to whatever phased areas would be installed and need to be fed water supply. Similarly, this alternative would also have waste discharges that would need to be sent somewhere. And for this alternative, again, we assume that they would be sent to the city of Peshtigo. One kind of caveat or alternative to this alternative would be if the town would want to treat their own waste on site, and we didn't look into that as deep as maybe we could have. But again, just to compare apples to apples and have known waste charge costs, we assume that it would go to the city of Peshtigo. This alternative would also need to establish the town water utility. And again, the town would be responsible for owning, operating, and maintaining the equipment. The image on the bottom here is just an example of a nice compressed, kind of pre-engineered treatment vessel system that would be, one of two trains that would be housed in a facility. That would then connect to the intake. Intakes would bring in source water, get filtered through this unit, and then pumped out to the distribution system. So again, another viable alternative to supply the town with drinking water. Getting into alternative three, which is sourced or having source water from the city of Peshtigo. And again, the town would be a retail customer, or all the residents would be retail customers. They would be, the system would be direct extensions from the city of Peshtigo water utility through this Wisconsin Administration Code chapter that, allows all water utilities to, extend into neighboring towns, assuming that there's approval and agreement in place for that. And so it's definitely a viable solution for the city of Peshtigo to extend into the town. A little bit more on the city of Peshtigo, they're a well-established, again, a groundwater drinking facility, utility where there's 3 deep aquifer well facilities with treatment. There's 2 water towers and 25 miles of water main that feeds about 1,400 customers. So again, a well-established water utility that has surplus capacity. I didn't put any metrics on that, but based on our engineering study, it was deemed that the city does have, enough storage and enough supply to feed at least phases 1 through 2 to the town of Peshtigo, and I think pretty much almost all of phase 3 as well. The image here on the bottom right shows available, or I guess the distribution system for the city. The next slide will have a little bit more detail on the alternative 3, where again, the water main extensions would come from the city, where because the town problem areas are so far away, I think we just assumed a single feed line that would need a preliminary booster pump station. I think we decided it at the town hall building just based on available land. Again, both the city distribution system and the city would operate the distribution system and the booster pump station. They would own and operate those 2 infrastructure pieces. Again, like I said before, we did assume that an elevated tank would be included just based on cost. However, I think it'd be up to the city at this point to determine if they would want an elevated tank out there, because again, they would be the owners and operators of that system. Water would only be metered at customer service lines, just standard to other similar water systems. For this alternative, a town water utility would not be required. Again, it's a simple extension of the city water distribution system. As noted below here, if selected, future discussions and negotiations would be sought to attain a mutually beneficial intergovernmental agreement with the city with that. So although the town wouldn't own any of the infrastructure, there'd still be an agreement in place where the town would have to be satisfied with, standards and all, different metrics involved with that. Again, all operation and maintenance would be by the city of Peshtigo, which is good and bad. There's less control by the town. It's the town residents that are getting the service, but again, it's the city that's, doing the work, doing the operation behind the scenes. And again, just as every other municipal system out there, the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin does determine the rates. So it's not like the city could jack up rates just because it's the town or whatever, but the Public Service Commission would determine the rates for the city of Peshtigo to the town residents. Again, below is just a schematic here where we're showing the different areas based on the different colors, and then the blue represents the water distribution system to the various areas. Next slide here gives a little bit more zoomed map here showing the different areas in the water main, where the colors of the phased areas. We show a preliminary elevated tank location siting here. Booster station located back at the city of Peshtigo that needs to be constructed to pump and boost the water over to the town. Okay, so again, just to summarize, alternative 3, another viable solution. Alternative number 4 is similar again, but different, where it's again sourced from the city of Peshtigo. However, the town residents would be, I guess the town as a whole would be considered a wholesale customer, where they would be, again, a customer from the city of Peshtigo. It would be a sales for resale, where there'd be rates determined for the town of Peshtigo as a single customer. Again, the source water is the exact same city of Peshtigo. As you'll see on the next map, it's pretty much the same tapping point, same booster pump station. We have a single water main connection from the city. But at this point, that it's the town would own the distribution system. The town would own this booster pump station required. Pretty much the town would have to own everything outside of the city of Peshtigo, water utility, where there'd be a master meter on this connecting point, either in the city or in the town. But after that master meter, the town would have to own everything after that and be responsible for all the costs and operation and maintenance for that. Again, elevated tank is required for this alternative because there's more than a minimum 50 homes in the area that it's supplying to. Like I said, a wholesale master meter would be used, and again, to make sure that residents are, or at least the counts for each resident are being billed accordingly. They would also have residential meters as well. For this alternative, the town would need to establish a water utility to maintain and operate the distribution system, the booster pump station. Operation and maintenance would be by the town of Peshtigo, or they could also hire out, a third party to own and operate the system. That's done throughout the state as well. And again, the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin does determine the rates, and it would be for the town of Peshtigo because it would be for the town water utility. Just another caveat here, selected, future discussions and negotiations would be sought to attain a mutually beneficial agreement with the city. Again, rates would be set, by the Public Service Commission. There would be operation agreement of, how much water and when and what rate would need to be determined. So again, it's not just a one and done thing. There'd be a lot of negotiations and a lot of discussions with the city. So to summarize, again, another viable alternative for the town. And this slide is essentially the same map as alternative 3. Again, same infrastructure, same booster pump station. And so based on those 4 alternatives, we created a decision matrix with applicable factors to help the town come up with its decision, where each of the 4 alternatives were ranked based on each of these different criteria. Water quality, how good of the water is it, pre and post treatment. Water quantity, how much water is available based on the source. How much piping is required. Like I said, there's a lot of piping that would be needed to pump waste discharges to the city, or whatever method would be to treat the waste. Future build-out potential was also considered. How available or how easy would it be to add on another well or another treatment plant or train if needed for either future growth, or maybe there's a big development in the future or a big customer that wants oodles of water. We looked at system storage and supply capacities then from each of the supply alternatives. We looked at just how the overall system complexity is. Is it easy to operate? Is it takes more work? We looked at the cost effectiveness. I know there's some reimbursement involved here, but again, we as engineers like to come up with costs because someone has to pay for it at the end of the day. Looked at system operation and maintenance. Again, costs, ease of operation, how many people are going to be needed to operate the system. Looked at the schedule of implementation. I know there's an urge to get something implemented here, and maybe a year or 2 between the alternatives would matter. So we looked at the schedule for each of the alternatives. And finally, permitting. There's a lot of agencies going to be involved with any of these alternatives. How many permits and how hard would it be to obtain the permits to get each of these alternatives approved? And so we looked at and with the assistance from the town, gave each of the 4 alternatives a number, ranking 1 to 5 for each of these 4 alternatives, just based on the alternative alone on these criteria. And then again, help with the town, we gave each of these criteria weight. How important was it to the town for each of these different criteria? And based on that, we do simple math to either get an unweighted sum for each of these alternatives, but then considering the weight as well, another sum below that. And doesn't matter if you weighted the alternative scores or not, it appeared based on these criteria that alternative 3 scored the highest based on all these criteria and how they were weighted. And again, alternative 3 was the city of Peshtigo source being retail customers, where the city of Peshtigo would be owning and operating pretty much all the infrastructure. Second place was alternative 4. That's not too close behind, but a solid second, where again, that's the city of Peshtigo sourced, but again, the town would be served as a wholesale customer. Alternatives 1 and 2 are third and fourth, where alternative 1 being the groundwater supply, which was a close third, and that's not a close third, but third, and then a close fourth was alternative 2 being the surface water treatment plant. The city of Peshtigo retail extensions provides safer, reliable, and affordable drinking water in a timely schedule. We didn't go into it too much, but just looking at the schedule again between each of the alternatives, it appeared that alternative 3 would be the quickest to implement. And below here is just a tentative schedule of based on the amount of infrastructure needed and permitting and design. Assuming that negotiation and the selected alternative would take place, the beginning of this year. Engineering report would be needed. Then after that would be completed in the spring of this year. Design and permitting then of the selected alternative. Again, this maybe is depends on which phase or which sample area the distribution system needs to go to. But again, design and permitting we thought would take between summer and winter, would be about half a year to complete, because there is a lot of water main to be designed and permitted through. Based on the number of contractors, then the next year it'd start construction in the spring of 2023. And then because it's a critical project, to be done that same year in the winter, you could do restoration the next year if needed, but to get water to the customer tap, by the end of 2023 would be a good goal. Like I said, the alternative, in this case, alternative 3, it'd be up to the city to determine if a water tower is needed, but water towers take a long time to construct, about a year and a half at then, when all said and done, to construct it and then to paint it, to get everything all squared away. And so that's kind of the longest thing that would take here. The good thing for this alternative 3 is the system could operate without it. The booster pump station could just be constantly running. The town wouldn't be able to get fire protection necessarily, but you could still have supply before the water tower is done. And so when the booster pump station would again begin construction when the water main would spring of 23 and that following fall of 23. And so when all said and done, water tower, booster station, and all the water main is installed, we've estimated to be fall of 2024. Again, the costs are kind of another side comment for this project, but we, put together costs for each alternative and for each of the phase of the distribution system that needs to be incorporated. Obviously, more water main is directly proportional to more cost. The left column here, water supply, this is just the cost for the booster pump station and then the water main associated to get water to the distribution system in each of the phases. So as you can see, there's more costs based on more pumping that needs to be done, more electricity, more chemicals, all sorts of costs like that. Distribution system is the majority of the project costs though. It's more even here when you're only feeding to phase 1A because that's only a few streets. However, you look at the future phases 1B and 2 or the larger phases, the costs get extraordinarily more just based on the amount of water main that needs to be installed. And these costs here are shown to be 20-year project costs, where those include all the costs for the purchasing the water, operating, mains if you have a main break, chemicals needed, etc. So in closing, Strand is ready to help with the town's next steps. We've provided the town some draft sections 1 through 3, kind of summarizing the alternatives. We're wrapping up sections 4 and 5 that note some of the decision matrix items, and then talks about some of the scheduling and final costs. So we're planning to get that report as a whole to the town within the next couple of days here, if not early next week. We plan on presenting the findings to town residents as a whole at a public meeting if there's ever a need for a public information meeting. We've had experience with these with other communities where, information needs to get to the town. And what better to do that than to, have an engineer who, looked at this report to share their findings. So we're ready to present those findings at a public meeting. We're ready to assist with other related communications. We know that there's been a couple summits going on with some interested parties. If it's worthwhile for us to get involved and share maybe our opinions on this report, we're ready to help with that. We understand that there's a City of Peshtigo capacity study that's looking more in depth. We had to do a kind of a preliminary study just to determine if the city was a viable solution, but we've heard the city's doing their own study, which is great. We'd be open to reviewing that just to double check to make sure our assumptions were correct for that. And then finally, we're ready to assist the town with implementation of selected alternative. If that's the city taking the lead on the design, we're happy to help review and just to make sure that the town is getting a good final engineering product. So with that, I want to thank everybody for listening to our alternatives analysis summary. I think if it's okay with the town, we can take a couple questions here in regards to the content that we presented.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Nate. I'd like to give the board certainly an opportunity if you have any immediate questions that you wanted to get answered.
I do.
Mhm.
Nate, when you spoke of a phase, are you speaking of area?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to confirm. It sounded like that, but I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we used the word phase a lot in this presentation. I think you could probably think of it as maybe criticality too. There was probably more contamination in the lower phase or the first area 1A, and so maybe that would be the most important to address first. But at the end of the day, yes, they're just areas based on different sampling sites.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any supervisors?
I don't think so. It's very thorough. Thank you.
Yeah, nice presentation.
Any questions from anybody in the audience?
Yeah, this is Jeff Lamont. I just had a couple real simple ones, if I could, please. What is the estimated quantity of waste discharge from the treatment of this? I guess in this alternative, there isn't one because the city is dealing with it. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, the costs that were presented were based on I think we obtained some waste discharge costs based on the type of user. And so we did a calculation, and I could get you the exact gallons per day or that kind of thing. But, we calculated the amount of volume and then calculated the charge that would be then paid to the city to then treat it.
Got it. Thank you. And if the tower would be required in this alternative, did you propose a location for the tower?
We propose a preliminary siting. Again, when we do our tower siting analysis, there's, it depends on which area is ultimately implemented. It depends on if there's available land. It depends, on FAA. I don't think there's any nearby airports nearby, but we did, and if it would be worthwhile for me to pull up the slide, I think we just kind of preliminarily cited it in the main intersection here, shown in the red circle. I can't tell you the names. I'm not super familiar with it offhand, but kind of in the area shown there, based on whatever land is available. But I think we assume that if this area 2 and everything in between is incorporated, that this would be kind of centered in the zone to provide the best hydraulics for it.
Great, thank you. And the last question I had, I know this is a fluid situation and issue, but originally I thought the town of Peshtigo was only interested in selling bulk water to the town. So this is an alternative. I guess I was a little surprised to see, but I could very well be wrong. That might have changed.
Sure, yeah. So I guess we were just tasked with looking at all 4 alternatives. I guess, and so we did that. I guess I was unaware if there was ever a,
No, you were given the task to evaluate all 4 and 8, and you did that for us because Jeff, that is an assumption. So,
Got it. Thank you.
um,
I was just
can you
curious.
say your name for the record, please?
John Kowalski,
Okay.
and I was curious at what size water main they would run if we tie into Peshtigo's water system.
yeah, so the question was which size water main
Yep.
would be, again, I think it depends where. I think, on this booster pump station, suction and discharge, I think we assume just general 12-inch line. I think as of other distribution systems of this size, we assume 12-inch backbone throughout the distribution system and then 8-inch to supply all the other streets. Just kept it simple. Again, it's really hard to go more in depth on this, A, time and place, and then B, just scale to learn or to determine more specific sizes than that.
Okay. Say your name, please.
Chuck Boyle. Is it my understanding that you can operate this with the booster pump while the system, while the tower is being erected?
Yeah, that's correct. So I guess the question was to confirm if the booster station could essentially feed the town without the tower. Yes, that's correct. Of course, the hydraulics would be a little different. I think we would want to, or whoever would engineer the booster station would need to consider, scenarios with and without the tower. But again, the main point of the tower is to, provide good hydraulics, but then ultimately to have fire protection for the town. And I guess depending on what sort of agreement the city and the town come up with if there's a restricted flow rate that the city can only provide, that the water tower may be needed to provide any, maximum day or peak hour flows.
Are there any other questions from those in the room? Any other board members? Anybody on Zoom?
I don't see any raised hands or chat.
Okay, well, like I said, thank you very much, Nate. You did support this very compressed presentation with a extensive 3-phase 100+ page report. And we look forward to getting the remaining sections from you within the next few days. Thank you very much for meeting the timeline. That's very important to the town and the comprehensiveness of the full report in general. It provides this board an opportunity to have a lot more content when we're doing our strategic discussions. And I'm glad you pointed out that, the city of Peshtigo, I don't want the public thinking that this was all some clandestine thing and it's all set in stone. We need this information so that we are armed with knowledge so that we can make the best choices for the safety of the community and continue those dialogues with those neighbors who are gracious enough to be part of the conversation. And thank you for being here for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. We'll be in touch.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was the meat of this, was to be able to provide this openly for the public so that you would know what that task order was and what had been in the works. And now the board will take that as we continue our very, very regular discussions with respect to strategy. So we're going to move on in the agenda for the evening. And we're up to number 8, employee annual compensation review and recommendation.
Okay, I gave each of you a sheet and calculated what that raise would include or come out to and what the total dollars would be. The increase that I'm proposing is 2.5%. Our road worker would increase from $23 to $23.58. Our recycling center attendant would increase from $17 to $17.43. Our recycling center manager would increase from $20 to $20.50. And our mowing would increase from $18 to $18.45 for a total increase of $1,946.59. I did ask Kelsey about the budget for this. I don't have an answer on it yet. I did some checking with other towns, and 2.5% seems to be what is given out. The people that are receiving raises are people who have been here 6 months, or we have a lot of new hires, with the exception of Paul McLean, who is a week shy of being that 6-month point, but Keith has, the recycling center manager has far exceeded my expectations.
Great.
And so that is my recommendation, my motion to the board.
All right, is there any discussion or is there a second?
The only question I would have is budget. It's in the budget. That's the only question I have. As long as it's in that budget, or if it would need a budget amendment.
I know at the recycling center, we can take this in. We have planned
Okay.
for it. John's not here, so I'm not sure
Yeah,
about the other
does
two.
anybody recall when we did our budget workshop? My recollection was that we did take into consideration potential increases, but I can't be certain about that. Does anyone else have a recollection?
We did talk about,
Mhm.
because we have a new treasurer and that rate was lower, that's where the recycling center took on the other landfills. With that, we also, I say with confidence for the recycling center, because we have things that had piled up for a long time. And I'm going to use batteries, because batteries were a big hit, a big expense for us. So having those out of there and having a clear guideline on what we have to do there, I feel confident we can take this, the ones for the recycling center.
Thank you. And I know that the HR and personnel committee did a really good job of making sure that this was not random. You know, they went through a review process and had considerable consideration, did comparables with other communities. It wasn't just a number picked out of the sky. So we have a motion. Is there a second on it? Did you second that, Kristen?
No, I didn't, but
Just a
Okay.
question.
Okay. So Kayla,
yes.
all in favor?
I
Aye. Opposed? None being heard, those are approved. Moving on to item number 9. Can I get a motion to go, I'm going to move that we go into closed session to convene in closed session pursuant to 19.851E of the Wisconsin statute for purposes of deliberating and or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and pursuant to 19.851G of the Wisconsin statutes for purposes of conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy, to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. Discussion regarding negotiation of potential water service solutions to address PFAS contamination and mediation status. Can I do a roll call to go into close? Supervisor Bauer.
Get a
Yes.
second to the motion.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Al. Can I get a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Supervisor Bauer, yes.
Yes.
Supervisor Furton,
Yes.
Supervisor Egger,
Yes.
Chair Boyle, yes. We are now in close. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I'll get that down probably in about 2 years.